Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park. Programs are produced independently by members of the community. The City of Highland Park is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of the City of Highland Park.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Dotson. I'm the founder and program coordinator for Highland Park Poetry, and I'm also your host for Poetry Today. I'm very pleased to have Caroline Johnson with me today. Caroline has two poetry chapbooks, Where the Street Ends and My Mother's Artwork, and more than 100 poems in print. She's a nominee for the Pushcart Prize and Best of Net. She's won numerous state and national poetry awards, including the 2012 Chicago Tribune's Printers Row Poetry Contest. She's president of Poets and Patrons of Chicago and leads poetry workshops for veterans and others in the Chicago area. Her first full-length collection of poems, The Caregiver, was inspired by years of family caregiving and is now available from Holy Cow Press. One of her favorite activities in the past was watching James Bond movies with her father. Thank you, Carolyn, for joining me today.
Thank you.
And I am also a James Bond fan, and in fact, I have on my calendar marked when the next film comes out in this like November or
Which
something
one
like
is
that.
that?
I think it's called 25 because it's the 25th James Bond
Oh,
film that they've
cool.
made.
Yeah,
Obviously, you can tell I'm a fan. Have you written any poems about James Bond?
There are a couple of James Bond poems in this book
Okay,
because that was, like I
interesting.
said, I think my dad and I must have watched every James Bond movie that is out there.
Yeah.
I don't know how many that is, but definitely more than, I don't know, maybe around 15. Does that sound right? Between 10 and 15
Okay.
or something? Yeah, he determined that Sean Connery's his favorite James
Oh,
Bond.
of course.
So.
Well, he's the original. He's the one who created the role.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a neat way to remember your father, and it was probably a good sharing experience. The bad puns. And
Well, yeah, and, you know, that was
action.
when he was in. He used to read Ian Fleming, you know, the
Okay.
original novels, paper novels of James Bond. But then he got into the movies, and then this was, you know, towards the end of his life, he had a rare neurological disorder, so he was either in a wheelchair or then even in the end in bedbound. That's when we would watch the James Bond movies. You know, so the last 5 or 7 years of his life, you know. So, and then when we finished James Bond, then we went to Charlie Chaplin.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Neat.
yeah.
Well, since you're talking about your father and that and his declining health, talk to us about The Caregiver.
Okay. Well, this book, The Caregiver, I did not sit down to write a book about caregiving. It's just I kind of fell into the role of family caregiver for both my mom and my dad. My mom suffered from Alzheimer's, and she also had rheumatoid arthritis and encephalitis. And then my dad, for many years they thought he had Parkinson's, but then he was for probably about 10 years they thought he had Parkinson's, but then he was re-diagnosed with an even more rare neurological disorder called multiple system atrophy, which is just called MSA for short. So he had MSA, and anything you read, Johnny Cash, by the way, is the most famous celebrity who had MSA. But anything you read about MSA, they say, honestly, anything online, they say you have 7 years from the date of onset to live, and my dad had it for 19 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm very proud to say I think it's due to his tender loving care, his strong determination that he survived for that long, you know. So, but these poems I wrote during maybe a 12-year period when I was family caregiver, you know. I was living with my husband, but I would visit once or twice a week, always on the weekends too. And
Were they close? Was their home
well,
close to you?
they
or?
lived in Plainfield. I lived in Willow Springs, so 20 to 30 minutes away. but it's we also had somebody who we paid to take care of my parents, and that was Donna, and that's another amazing story. She was our family caregiver for at least 10 years, which really is unheard of. If anybody knows anything about finding caregivers, usually either something tragic happens to your loved one and they pass away or something, and so only 1 or 2 years maybe that a caregiver would. But she took care of my parents for 10 years, so that was really a phenomenal story.
Yeah.
And in fact, this book is dedicated not only to my parents, who have both passed away now, but also to Donna. And so she was our family caregiver, did a wonderful job, yeah.
Well, obviously, I guess if that's the world that you're living in and that responsibility, then that's what's stimulating you as a writer. It seems only natural that you would start to write
Yeah,
poems about
people
the
ask me, did I write while I was there? But really, I would go home and I had no problem coming up with ideas to write about, because it's always on your mind when you're a caregiver.
Yeah.
It's just, the words just pour out on the page. You're carrying this burden with you. It is a burden to be a caregiver, but it's also a huge, I like to say, a huge privilege too. The fact that your parents trust you. I was the power of attorney for health care, and then co-power of attorney for finances. My other sister was power of attorney. But I made the day-to-day decisions for my parents. And what I like to say, and what I say in my introduction to this book, is I really learned how to be an advocate. Advocate meaning you fight for the rights of your parents. You talk to doctors, nurses, CNAs, social workers, speech pathologists. The list goes on. When they're hospitalized, you go every day to the hospital and manage what's going on, and that's really what a family caregiver does. I don't have any kids, so I think that, and I live nearby, so I think that's why the responsibility fell onto my shoulders. I have 3 other siblings who were definitely vested in this, but they had kids, and 2 of them lived in another state, so it's not something they would have been able to do.
Right.
So.
Well, while I'm glad that I'm not in that position yet, my mother lives in Oregon. I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think it's really hard
it's
for
tough.
the family member who lives far away, too, because they want to be there, but they can't be there, unless you fly there. Like my sister lives in Colorado, my other in Michigan, and so they would make trips here, but there's only so much you can do.
Right.
So, but we communicated on the phone, and they were a great sense of support for me if I ever had any issues. But they did what they could. Put it that way. Yeah.
Well, and then you also, oh gosh, I'm like losing my mind. You talked about I'm having a moment. I guess Nope. Keep moving.
Okay.
Talk to me about, and it'll come to me.
I can read would you like me to read a poem?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read the. I didn't even mark this one, but I really should have. Well, this book is divided into 3 sections. First is father, second is mother, and third is, that's not the title of the sections, but that's just the way it's divided. And the last section is about grieving, because really as a caregiver, you're grieving the whole time when your loved ones are declining. But I think I'll read, this is, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, the title poem to the book. It's called The Caregiver. And this one, I don't say it's dedicated to Donna, but it's all about Donna. And you're going to see she was our family caregiver. So it's called The Caregiver. Let me put my glasses on. I'm sorry. 1 minute, please. I apologize. Okay.
Large fonts. Large fonts.
Okay, The Caregiver. See this Lithuanian woman. She has been feeding my father dinners of mashed turkey and broccoli, potato pancakes, washing his clothes, bathing him, offering him the choice between Wolf Blitzer and Vanna White for years. Observe her hands as they gently push his body to the side of the hospital bed. They are covered with latex gloves. Consider the way she has taught me to tenderly pull up his socks and cover him with a quilt. put drops in his eyes, rub powder on a rash, splash his neck with Old Spice, then bend down to kiss his cheek good night. You must come closer. You must hang up your jacket. Be prepared to spend hours listening to his slurred speech. Help feed him applesauce with vitamins. Raise and lower his bed. Monitor his erratic heartbeat. Remember what he has given up. His Buick LeSabre, his cane, his walker, then finally his wheelchair, to get to where he now lives, a bed with guardrails. Go to the nightstand and offer him a Frango Mint. Put on his favorite Garrison Keillor CD. Listen as he smiles with one good eye and whispers something so faint you ask him to repeat, I'm lucky. Think about all this while driving the long way home. You may get angry at the world, like I do, until you see your husband asleep in the lazy boy, bare legs dangling, until you suddenly realize what the caregiver has taught you, as, without a word, you slowly rub lotion onto your husband's chapped heels, then cover his ice-cold feet.
Wow.
That particular poem was published in Lunch Ticket, if anyone's heard of that journal,
Wow, okay.
and it was nominated for a Best of the Net
Well,
because it was an online journal.
I can certainly understand why. I do remember what I was thinking about, which was the changing relationship. I mean, as a child, when your parents, and I think what brought me back to it was that line in that poem where you're talking about think about what he's given up, the Buick LeSabre, the cane, is that the relationship also has changed. The dynamic has changed from being the parent who's the responsible one, who is the one who takes care of the child, and now the roles are reversed. So
Right. Well, I mean, for my mom, she had, 100% pure Alzheimer's, so it was kind of, in her personality naturally, very extroverted, very gregarious, very kind, I think. But so I was telling someone, I mean, her personality, even though she had Alzheimer's, she still stayed very outgoing and still very friendly. I mean, occasionally she had some moments where she turned into a stranger and you weren't quite sure, I mean, a personality change that might have been different. My dad, on the other hand, when he was younger, I mean, I remember he had a little bit of a temper, and but in his older age, and I don't know if it was a matter of being dependent. You have to, when you're a patient like that, or you have an illness like that, and you need a caregiver, you have to learn to give up things. You give up. Well, first you give up driving, and then you eventually give up walking. You're in a wheelchair, and then you're in your bed. I mean, my dad was in his bed for the last two and a half years of his life, and couldn't even get in a wheelchair. Although we had him in a nursing home the last 2 months, and they got him into a reclining wheelchair. But see, Donna couldn't do that by herself because they had 3 staff members to do that. So, but his personality, he mellowed in his older age and became more. Just really very pleasant person to be around, very, I mean, what I wrote in, I don't know if it was my introduction to the book, but he's always happy to see me, always happy to see my brother or my family, and that just really makes your day when you go there and he's still, in a good mood. Or that would be if he wasn't sleeping or if he wasn't confused, on a good day. And I have another poem in here called A Good Day, which you have to get him on a good day, when he's alert, because that's not always the case, especially with neurological disorders like that, So.
Well, I know that when did the book come out this spring?
The book came out about May 15th, 2018.
So I know you've had a number of different events already, and you're on the circuit, and we're so glad that you're going to be coming back and to be a feature for Highland Park Poetry as well. How is it the reception for this?
Well, pretty good. Well, my book release party was the end of May. I can't remember. Maybe it was May 18th. I can't remember, but it was at the Oak Brook Public Library, and there were about 50 people who came, and it was real nice. It was like a big party, and we had some activities with some door prizes. That was fun. And then I've read at Brewed Awakening in Westmont, which is this small coffee shop. I was a feature with Gail Gephardt.
Oh, yeah.
So that went well. And then just this past weekend, I read at Barnes & Noble in Naperville, and I had, that was a nice reading too. So some of my family were able to come to that one, so that was nice,
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think that just in terms of having a market for your book, so many people are in the position of providing care for a loved one. And so the fact that you're sharing your experience, while it was a personal experience, there's also a universal,
Yeah, that's
very
actually
broad
what my
appeal.
publisher and I had a conversation about this. His name is Jim Perlman with Holy Cow. And he said, yeah, the personal and the universal is exactly what he said, because I use I, of course. These are very personal poems. But if caregiving has touched your life in some way, you may be able to relate to it because it has more of a universal appeal, meaning, you know, it can apply to not just myself, but to other people. There's the universal and the personal, or however you want to say it. Yeah,
well, you mentioned the publisher. How did you get in connected with him, or how was your
my husband and I always like to go up to Minnesota to vacation a lot of the time. Either we've gone to Upper Peninsula, that's Michigan, but the Boundary Waters or Lake Superior. And then about 2 years ago, I just talked my husband into going near where I went to a one-week conference in Bemidji, Minnesota. They have a pretty significant Native American population there in Bemidji. It's in the western part of Minnesota, and they have a wonderful writing conference called the Northwoods Writing Conference, and they get all kinds of, it's not just poetry. I mean, it's poetry, nonfiction, fiction, and they get wonderful leaders. And so I went because the leader for poetry, or one of the leaders, was Natalie Diaz, and so I studied with her for a week. She's a Native American poet. And it was a phenomenal workshop. But anyway, while I was there, Jim Perlman from Holy Cow came to sell his books, really, and represent the publishing world. And so I, I met a poet who had a book published by him. So I thought, that could be a possibility. And I bought her book, and I bought a few other books. And then when I got back, I looked him up. He didn't remember me at all, but I sent him, he wanted a query, which I think is unusual for poetry. Usually they want the whole manuscript. So I sent him, he wanted just a sampling of poems. That's on his website. So I sent him about 6 poems in a query letter. And then I didn't hear anything from him, so I followed up with a phone call. And then he got back to me, an email right away, and he kind of went over my poems and kind of dissected them and essentially said no. So I was like, well, I'm used to the no's by this time. I spent 2 years of rejections, with contests. But I thought, I'm going to be an advocate for my poetry. So I emailed him back with a really kind of nice, persuasive letter saying I believe in the mission of this manuscript, and this is what I think, and but I appreciate your time anyway. And I really thought that'd be the end of it. And then he came back and he goes, well, I think I've been mistaken, Caroline. Please send me your manuscript, So I sent him the manuscript again, forgot about it, and lo and behold, he accepted it, And so it was quite a an achievement for me, and just a wonderful validation of all the efforts I put into the manuscript, because I did revise it. Every time I got a rejection, I'd go into my manuscript and revise it, reorder it. So I look at it, the money I spent for these contests trying to publish it, and I did get I did get some honorable mentions, some close, but that doesn't do anything. You lose money on it. But all that money was all these rejections, I would revise the manuscript to make it better. So I thought that's like my money I could have paid a teacher to do. Because really, you are your own best critic. You are your own best editor, if you have the discipline to do that. And so that's why, I rationalize that. But in the future, when I hopefully publish again, I probably won't go the contest route, because I spent 2 years doing that. And it's like you have 300 applicants and one winner. And it's just really, really stiff competition.
Well, and so what about your relation? So Jim accepts the manuscript and says, I want to publish this. What was the experience of that process?
Well, there's about a year process where that was a learning curve, just back and forth, picking out the cover design. I didn't format it. He has his own designer, but I got a lot of personal say on, the table of contents I wanted on 2 pages. I didn't want it on 1 page when I saw it, and I did copy it and proof it for my, he kind of relies on his writers to do that, which kind of makes sense because they have the more vested, especially if they're good at that,
Right.
So it was back and forth also. He let me edit some, he let me revise some of the poems until a certain
Wow,
deadline. So
okay.
that was really nice,
Yeah,
you know.
that's great.
So I think I made it better. He was wonderful to work with, and he still is.
Good.
He likes, I'm trying to promote it now, and so he sent the book out to various places for reviews, and so he's been in business for 40 years though.
Wow.
So last year was his 40th year
Oh, my
anniversary.
goodness.
So yeah,
Wow,
he's based in Duluth, Minnesota.
Well, it's good to
So-
be in the hands of an expert, as it were. Could we have another poem?
Sure. So this actually, one of the cover comments in here is from a lady from St. Thomas Hospice well, they're based in Hinsdale. But hospice, I think, would be a really good audience for this poem, or anybody who's going through hospice. Both my parents were on hospice. And we saw hospice as a good thing because they provided a lot of support for my parents, even though it might sound depressing, oh, your parents are at the end of their life, but it was a very positive and spiritual thing. So this poem is called Hospice. When you watch someone die, you must sit up close and open your heart to pronounce each vowel. You must let your loved one embrace the air, let his arm extend towards infinity. You must help him touch the stars. When you watch your father die, remember it is a privilege to stroke his stone cheek, to kiss his forehead, to tuck his hair behind his ears. You must try not to be so important. You must wave when he decides to leave. When you watch a bomber pilot die who once got lost in the threshold of a dream, remember he no longer needs his walker, his cane, his wheelchair. Remember, there will come a day when he will no longer need you, will no longer need his body, though you will pray for him to bring back the light as he flies past 1,000 sunrises in the sky. My father was a bomber pilot in the Cold War, so he flew B-47s, and so that there was some references, like there's a poem called Parkinson's Flight in here, and he was part of the Strategic Air Command in the late 1950s. So I didn't learn that about him really until later on in his life, so it was kind of interesting, but yeah. So.
Well, I'm sitting here getting my eyes are going, I'm it's like, wow, that's some moving poetry there. I'd love for you to read another one.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to read one from my mom's section.
Yeah.
So I think I'll read one about Alzheimer's. My mom had Alzheimer's. This one I wrote a long time ago, but it's called Alzheimer's Dream. And it's also in, I made these little chapbooks. This one's called My Mother's Artwork, which she was an artist. That was her hobby. So this is all paintings by my mom. And this poem about Alzheimer's is in here. So some poems about her are in here. And then this one is a book that I also put together with my friends' watercolors. So those are chapbooks, but they're not available on, if anyone's interested and anyone knows me, I can surely provide you a copy. So, all right, so this is called Alzheimer's Dream. You're a stranger to me now, though I've known you all my life. So long ago I wandered into your kitchen to inquire when dinner would be ready, and if there was anything that I could make. You smiled instantaneously as you do now, and I helped you peel potatoes, snap green beans. But you today forgot me again, and the day, and the occasion. But no matter. We're making baked potatoes, green beans, and steak, I think, to eat while we watch the imaginary parade and fireworks, an early 4th of July. Let's sit down here and talk. Let's look at the weather. Let's do everything to be together. Let's try not to remember, have a drink to forget, that we'd ever once met a lifetime ago when I called you mother and needed you so.
Wow. Pretty potent stuff. But you write about everything. It's been a privilege over the years that I've known about your writing, because I know you're involved with Illinois State Poetry Society, and we do the library displays in April. I always get your poems for that. And then also when Highland Park Poetry frequently has its themed galleries in the Muses Gallery, like with our current
I'm
one
almost
for,
as involved as you, but not quite, Jennifer.
no, but like I'm really happy that your poem Barista is on our current Summer Muses Gallery. At
You know
Highland
what's
Park Poetry
interesting about that is that somebody saw that poem and I got an invitation for a Q&A, and so I answered for this person's blog, and it's escaping me now. It's terrible. I should have brought it with me, but maybe I can provide it for you
Okay.
later. But I'm actually going to be a feature on this blog because of that poem. Isn't that funny? I don't know.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So that poem I rewrote. I wrote it a long time ago, and then I rewrote it for Wilda Morris's poetry challenge,
Okay.
and so it actually won first place in her like 2 years ago. But it was a fun poem, and I actually worked as a barista. So I was a barista at Starbucks for a year, and that was a great experience. But I was also a barista at Borders, which was not quite as good of experience. So it went out of business now, so I can say that. But
Well, you definitely speak from experience then.
Yeah.
Now, do you drink coffee? I mean,
I'm a huge coffee drinker.
okay.
Yeah, I'm a coffee connoisseur or
oh,
snob, you
wonderful.
might say.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'm always impressed about your the depth of the writing. Any subject, everything from trains and baristas to history. I remember reading that you'd submitted a poem about the I&M Canal, I think.
Yeah,
And just
yeah.
amazing stuff. What are some of the big prompts?
Well, we do that. When you mentioned history, I organize a group. I'm president right now of Poets and Patrons, and one of the things we do is Write Chicago, which we started about 5 or 7 years ago. And I'm the main organizer of them, where we go into Chicago museums. We've gone into Art Institute or the Contemporary Museum of Fine Arts, the Mexican Museum of Fine Arts in Pilsen. And we've gone into a ton of museums, outdoor like Garfield Conservatory, outdoor venues too. And just we meet, we disperse to look at the exhibits, then we get together, we write, and then we share if we want to share. And sometimes we have even an email critiquing afterwards, but it's a free writing workshop, and the only thing you have to pay for is the admission to the museum. But if anyone is interested in that, you should go on our website. It's poetsandpatrons.net.
Okay.
And we have a newly revised website. It's a lot of things on there if you're interested in our bi-monthly poetry critiquing workshops as well. Those are every other month at the Harold Washington Library. We have a big contest that's on there every year. The deadline's September 1st. The Illinois State Poetry Society, I'm actually a facilitator for the Darien group, and we have a nice trusted group of wonderful poets who know each other, and we critique each other's poems every other month at the Indian Prairie Library. But as you know, there's a lot of different libraries the Illinois State Poetry Society is a part of. So I don't have time to really mention. But up here in this part of the world, it would be, I believe, the Northbrook Library that Susan Moss leads. Yeah. But you should go to our website if you're at all interested, and it's illinoispoets.org, and that you can read about a lot of different things going on in that world. So yeah.
Wow, wonderful. Well, a bonus plug for those groups as well. And you are definitely very, very active in the area.
I should probably give a plug for my website as well, and that is www.caroline-johnson.com. So, and that's CAROLINE-johnson.com. So anyway, and you can read some information. I put on one of the pages there a listing links to most of my poems on the web that I can think of. So if you're interested in reading more about my poetry, it's on there as well. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the book, The
Thank
Caregiver.
you. I appreciate it.
And best of success. And we look forward to seeing you at Highland Park Poetry.
Thank you.
Speaks this fall.
Yeah, and so this book is available on Amazon if you're at
Okay.
all interested. It's $16. Will be doing some readings. If you go to my website, and then I can sell it to you at a little bit of a discount at my readings. My chapbooks are available at my readings as well, but not on my website. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Yeah, it's great to have you here.
It's exciting.
And are you working on a new manuscript as well?
Well,
or are
I
you
am
just so
actually,
exhausted
no,
from this?
full disclosure, I actually, this August will be the 2-year anniversary of being cancer-free. I was diagnosed 3 years ago. And so I've written quite a few poems about cancer, and so my next book is going to be about cancer. Hopefully it's not depressing. I try and put a positive spin on it. So, but that's what I'm working on. So.
That's wonderful. Well, very exciting. We look forward to bringing